off in this game and you lost to a team that won 10 games last year in your own building. And somebody please explain to me two things. Number one, defensive guru? Stephanie White's a defensive guru? You gave up 107. A C note +7 at home.
What makes this loss so difficult for Indiana Fever fans to accept is that this was supposed to be the beginning of a new era. National television, sold-out arena, massive WNBA hype surrounding Caitlin Clark and this revamped Fever roster. Everything was perfectly set up for a statement win. Instead, the Fever gave up 107 points at home to a Dallas Wings team that struggled badly last season, and suddenly all the questions people ignored during the off-season came crashing into reality at once. If Stephanie White is being labeled one of the league's elite defensive coaches, then this performance raises serious concerns immediately. Because championship-level teams do not allow this kind of defensive collapse in a season opener with this much energy behind them.
The fastest point guard to do so. So the fastest point guard to ever reach 1,000 points. Also, she is the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 1,000 points, 250 rebounds, 250 assists. Caitlin Clark is generational. That's pretty badass. Fastest player ever to do 1,000, 250, and 250 plus.
And that is what makes this loss even more frustrating. Indiana's star trio actually delivered exactly what fans dreamed about. Caitlin Clark brought the pace, the vision, and the superstar gravity that changes the entire floor. Kelsey Mitchell looked explosive and aggressive from the opening possession. Aaliyah Boston completely controlled stretches of the game offensively with elite efficiency and composure. Your three franchise pillars combined for 73 points in front of one of the loudest crowds Gainbridge Fieldhouse has seen in years, and somehow it still ended in a heartbreaking overtime loss. That is the kind of game that instantly shifts the spotlight away from the players and directly onto the coaching staff and roster construction.
Allen, forget about it. Forget about it. I was like, are you serious? We did this? We signed this player? Not good. The big three, let's just be honest. When you score 20, 23, and 30, your big three just went off.
Caitlin Clark's stat line may not look perfect from three-point range, but the deeper story matters far more. Even on a night where the outside shot was inconsistent, she still controlled the rhythm of the offense and continued making WNBA history at a pace the league has never seen before. She officially became the fastest point guard in league history to reach 1,000 career points, and even more impressively, the fastest player ever to record 1,000 points, 250 rebounds, and 250 assists. That combination of scoring, rebounding, and playmaking is exactly why the Caitlin Clark effect continues dominating conversations around the WNBA. She impacts every possession even when the shot is not falling.
Talk about this team. Depth, front office, depth, lack of length, depth. The second team is not good. Your bench, not very good.
Now let's talk about the real reason this game slipped away, because almost nobody in mainstream sports media is focusing on it. Indiana's bench completely collapsed under pressure. Sophie Cunningham played heavy minutes but never became a reliable offensive factor. Lexi Hull looked rusty returning from injury and never found rhythm. Raven Johnson struggled to impact the game consistently, and the second unit as a whole failed to provide energy when the starters desperately needed relief. That is where momentum quietly disappeared. While Dallas continued getting production throughout the roster, Indiana's offense became increasingly dependent on the same three players carrying everything possession after possession. Over the course of a long WNBA game, especially in overtime, that imbalance eventually becomes fatal.
Up in this game now, didn't it? I'm supposed to love Stephanie White because she's this defensive wizard. I mean, Paige Beckers goes off on you. Aguba Wale, who just got back from China, dropped 22. You got beat at home.
This is where Stephanie White's rotations are going to face serious scrutiny over the next several days. Fans can accept losing to elite competition. What they struggle to accept is watching obvious adjustments never happen in real time. When the offense stalled, the Fever kept forcing the same struggling combinations onto the floor. When defensive breakdowns started piling up, there was no visible counterpunch. And when the bench desperately needed scoring support, One of the team's most productive preseason scorers remained sitting on the sideline. That is the kind of decision fans remember long after opening night ends.
Bench, not very good. Now, let's get over to this. Holly Rowe just said the Fever training staff appear to be doing something with Caitlin Clark's groin in the tunnel, but couldn't confirm it. Caitlin is now back on the bench with a heating pad around her lower back. This was in the third into the fourth quarter. Grant Young from SI.
Shotori Walker-Kimbrough not seeing the floor became one of the biggest talking points of the entire night, and honestly, it is hard to argue against the criticism. During preseason action, she consistently looked like one of the few reserve players capable of creating instant offense and stabilizing second-unit possessions. Against New York, she attacked confidently, scored efficiently, and brought veteran composure when the offense started getting stagnant. So when Indiana's bench struggled this badly in the season opener, fans immediately started asking the same question. Why was one of the only proven scoring options completely removed from the rotation? In a game decided by tiny margins, decisions like that become impossible to ignore. All off-season, Fever fans heard the same narrative repeated over and over again. Stephanie White would transform this team defensively. That was supposed to be the major difference this season. But on opening night, the defense looked disconnected, late on rotations, vulnerable in transition, and completely unable to slow down Dallas when the pressure intensified. Paige Buchers looked calm and in control throughout huge stretches of the game, while Arike Augunbowle attacked Indiana's perimeter defense relentlessly. Giving up 107 points at home after your stars produce 73 offensively is not a small issue. That immediately becomes the story of the night. Then came the moment that completely changed the emotional atmosphere inside the arena. Reports from the ESPN broadcast revealed that the Fever training staff appeared to be working on Caitlin Clark physically near the tunnel area before she later returned to the bench with visible heat treatment around her lower back. Shortly after that, reports indicated she briefly went back to the locker room before returning to action. Even without an official injury update, the reaction across the WNBA world was immediate panic. Because after everything this franchise has invested into Caitlin Clark's superstar rise and league-wide impact, the last thing Indiana can afford is another lingering health concern becoming part of the story this early in the season. And now the pressure surrounding the Indiana Fever just exploded overnight. What was supposed to be a celebration of a new WNBA season suddenly turned into a storm of criticism involving coaching decisions, defensive failures, bench depth concerns, and growing anxiety around Caitlin Clark's health. That is why this next game against the Atlanta Dream suddenly feels much bigger than a normal early season matchup. Because if the same issues show up again, the conversation around this team is going to get much louder, much more aggressive, and much harder for the organization to control. The hype around this Fever team is real, but after this opener, so are the questions. What makes this loss feel so catastrophic for the Indiana Fever is not just the scoreboard. It is the fact that this was supposed to be the night where the entire WNBA officially entered a new era. The building was electric. National television cameras were everywhere. Every sports show in America spent the entire week hyping up Caitlin Clark, the Fever, and the possibility that this franchise was finally ready to become a legitimate contender. And then the game started, the stars delivered, the crowd exploded with energy, and somehow Indiana still walked off the floor with a devastating overtime loss to a Dallas Wings team that won only 10 games last season. That is why fans are furious right now. Because when your franchise players combine for 73 points at home and you still lose, the conversation immediately shifts away from player performance and directly toward coaching decisions, roster construction, defensive identity, and whether this Fever team is actually built to survive the pressure that comes with the Caitlin Clark spotlight. The most unbelievable part of this entire game is that Indiana's core stars actually looked dangerous together for long stretches of the night. Caitlin Clark controlled the tempo, manipulated defensive rotations, and created open looks even when Dallas sent constant pressure toward her. Kelsey Mitchell attacked like a player determined to remind the entire WNBA why she remains one of the league's most explosive scorers. And Aaliyah Boston may have delivered one of the most complete performances of her professional career, dominating inside while also facilitating offense at an elite level. This was not a situation where Indiana's stars disappeared under pressure. This was not a situation where Caitlin Clark played poorly and the offense collapsed. In fact, the exact opposite happened. The Fever's star trio generated enough offense to win most WNBA games comfortably. That is why this loss feels so alarming. Because if 73 combined points from your franchise core is not enough to secure a home opener, then the deeper structural issues surrounding this roster become impossible to ignore. Even on a night where the outside shot was inconsistent, Caitlin Clark still managed to make WNBA history again, and honestly, that is becoming the expectation every single time she steps on the floor now. She became the fastest point guard ever to reach 1,000 career points, and she also became the fastest player in league history to record 1,000 points, 250 rebounds, and 250 assists. Think about how absurd that is for a second. That is not just elite scoring. That is total offensive control over the game. And what makes Clark so dangerous is that defenses are already throwing playoff-level pressure at her this early in the season. Teams are trapping her high, face-guarding her off-ball, bumping her physically every possession, and forcing her into difficult contested looks. Yet despite all of that attention, she still finished with positive impact metrics and continuously created offensive opportunities for everyone around her. That is the Caitlin Clark effect. Even when the shooting numbers are imperfect, the defensive gravity alone changes the entire geometry of the floor. Now here is where the game truly unraveled, and this is the part that should seriously concern Indiana Fever fans moving forward into the 2026 WNBA season. The bench unit completely collapsed when the pressure intensified. And not just offensively. Energy disappeared. Defensive intensity dropped. Transition communication broke down. The second unit looked overwhelmed by the moment. Sophie Cunningham was brought in to provide toughness, spacing, leadership, and emotional intensity. Instead, Indiana got almost no offensive production during crucial stretches of the game. Lexi Hull, returning from injury, never looked comfortable finding her rhythm offensively. Raven Johnson showed flashes defensively but looked hesitant in half-court offense. And the biggest issue of all was that the coaching staff never found a reliable adjustment once the bench started bleeding momentum. This is where championship-caliber teams separate themselves from talented teams. Talent alone is not enough in the WNBA anymore. Depth matters. Rotational flexibility matters. Bench consistency matters. And in this game, Indiana's second unit completely failed the test while Dallas continued getting contributions throughout their roster. The decision that may haunt Stephanie White the most after this game is the complete absence of Shotori Walker-Kimbrough from the rotation. Because the moment Indiana's offense started stagnating, fans immediately began asking the same question all over social media. Why is one of your best preseason scorers glued to the bench while the second unit struggles possession after possession? Walker-Kimbrough already proved during preseason that she could generate instant offense and stabilize chaotic stretches offensively. Against New York, she attacked aggressively, scored efficiently, and brought veteran confidence to the floor. So when the Fever bench combined for almost no production in the biggest game of the young season, the decision to completely remove her from the rotation became impossible to defend. And this is where the controversy surrounding Stephanie White is going to grow louder. Because fans can accept losing close games. What they struggle to accept is watching obvious adjustments sit unused while momentum slips away in real time. All off-season, the biggest selling point surrounding Stephanie White was defense. Fever fans were told this team would become tougher, smarter, more physical, and far more disciplined defensively. But on opening night, none of that identity showed up consistently when it mattered most. Paige Buchers looked calm and completely in control against Indiana's perimeter defense, while Arai Kaugunbol attacked gaps relentlessly and punished every defensive mistake. Dallas dictated tempo late in the game while Indiana looked reactive instead of aggressive. And this is the brutal reality now hanging over the Fever organization. If your stars score 73 points and you still surrender 107 at home, then your defensive system failed completely. There is no softer way to say it. Then came the moment that completely changed the emotional atmosphere inside the arena. During the second half, reports from the ESPN broadcast indicated that the Fever training staff appeared to be checking on Caitlin Clark physically near the tunnel area before she later returned to the bench with visible heat treatment around her lower back and groin area. Instantly, panic spread across social media. Because this is the nightmare scenario Indiana Fever fans have feared since the beginning of the Caitlin Clark era. The expectations surrounding Clark are already overwhelming. She carries massive WNBA ratings, national attention, ticket sales, media pressure, and franchise expectations every single night. So the moment fans saw her receiving treatment during opening night, concern exploded immediately across the basketball world. Even more concerning was the fact that she briefly disappeared back into the locker room before returning to the bench. And while there is no official indication yet that this is a serious injury, the visual alone was enough to send fear through Fever fans everywhere. Because this franchise simply cannot afford a lingering health issue involving the face of the league this early in the season. And now the pressure surrounding the Indiana Fever has officially reached another level. What was supposed to be a triumphant opening night for the WNBA's most hyped franchise suddenly became a storm of criticism involving coaching decisions, defensive failures, roster depth concerns, and growing anxiety surrounding Caitlin Clark's physical condition. The next game against the Atlanta Dream no longer feels like a normal early season matchup. Now it feels like an early pressure test for the entire organization. Because if these same problems show up again, weak bench production, defensive breakdowns, questionable rotations, then the national conversation around this team is going to become much louder and much more uncomfortable. And that is why Fever fans are watching so closely right now. Because this team still has superstar talent. The hype is real. The league impact is real. Caitlin Clark is still transforming the WNBA in real time. But after this opener, one question suddenly hangs over everything. Is Indiana actually built to handle the pressure that comes with becoming the center of the basketball world?